Dawn crawls over Tehran, a red sun creeping above the Alborz mountains. Only this dawn is not the first light of a new day, but the last glint of the old world. Nuclear contrails lace the sky above the Persian Gulf, social media feeds explode into desperate static, and a half-heard siren in Haifa morphs into the planet-wide howl of history tearing. Stay with the story to discover how a single flash over the eastern Mediterranean ignites a chain of miscalculations that topples empires, poisons the jet stream, and turns ordinary grocery lists into survival manifestos. Keep listening and you will witness how the final tweet, the final prayer, and the final ember of human resilience intertwine, because the apocalypse does not arrive in one night, it arrives in chapters, and the next chapter begins now. The first 45 minutes. A Tuesday, 11:17 a.m. local time. Israeli missile defense operators notice the launch too late. Somewhere above the Zagros Mountains, a modified Shahab-6, long-rumored, long-mocked, punches into the stratosphere. Its warhead is crude by superpower standards, but 25 kilotons is more than enough. At 11:41 a.m., a white sphere bursts over an industrial suburb of Tel Aviv. Glass melts inward, asphalt ripples like black syrup, and the electromagnetic pulse gobbles every unshielded bite from Haifa to Beersheba. 1,100 kilometers away, newsrooms glance at garbled wire reports. 5 minutes later, every satellite slot over the Middle East blooms with heat signatures. The world exhales once, sharply, and forgets to inhale again. Hour 1 to 4, reflex arcs. Red phones and polished oak desks. In West Jerusalem's hardened bunker, Israel's National Security Council authorizes Iron Maccabee, a playbook prepared since Damona's earliest days. 2 Jericho 3 missiles lift toward declared Iranian military sites. 3 more veer to decapitate command and control nodes near Esfahan. Tel Aviv's skyline is still drifting skyward as radioactive dust when the counterstrike arcs east like vengeful comets. Tehran's anti-air umbrella, optimized for cruise missiles, claws at ballistic ghosts and misses. At 16:09 local time, twin suns bloom above the Iranian plateau. The reciprocal carnage is near simultaneous, like mirrors shattering on opposite walls. Outside, observers see only twin flashes on live thermal overlays, context vaporized, motive irrelevant. Days 1 to 3, treaty cascades. News anchors mutter dates of forgotten wars: 1956, 1967, 1973, 1991, none fits. Turkey triggers Article 5 consultations claiming the EMP blast disrupted avionics over Iskenderun. NATO corridors swarm with jittery aides quoting tripwire clauses. Russia denounces Zionist barbarity and moves Black Sea fleets through the Bosporus to evacuate nationals. Inside the Situation Room, the U.S. president juggles alliance arithmetic: defend Israel and lose Baghdad, restrain Israel and lose Florida swing vote. China's foreign ministry calls for strategic calm while sea-basing submarines slide into the Arabian Sea. Diplomacy, once a chessboard, now resembles Jenga with nitroglycerin blocks. Week 1, the energy spasm. Brent crude spikes to $480 a barrel before trading halts. Supertankers clog the Strait of Hormuz in a desperate U-turn, colliding, igniting, sinking. Insurance giants invoke force majeure, global logistics reverts from containerization to guesswork. Bangalore's data farms brownout, Detroit's just-in-time factories miss 1 million camshafts. Food price algorithms glitch, marking lettuce at $120 per head in Sao Paulo before collapsing entirely. The world's economic heartbeat becomes an arrhythmic flutter, starving supply lines of oxygen. Month 1 to 2, the second nuclear age. Pakistan activates minimum credible deterrence and disperses warheads. Saudi Arabia, caught between arch-rival Iran's ashes and Israel's lethal nervousness, unveils its rumored purchase of Chinese DF-21 variants stationed outside Riyadh, warheads on loan until the crisis passes. Egypt reopens missile silos in Sinai last tested under Soviet advisors. The IAEA's Vienna HQ, half evacuated, issues an unnumbered memo: arms control architecture is effectively null. Arms race theory had predicted decades, reality compresses it into 57 days. Nuclear latency nations complete their sprints: Japan in submarines, South Korea in hangars, Germany in muted alpine bunkers. The bomb goes viral. Season 1, Black Snow. 3 months after Tel Aviv and Tehran's annihilation, northern sunsets glow bruised purple. Soot from petrochemical fires swirls above 15 kilometers, rebounding solar glare into space. Temperatures dip a global average of 2 degrees Celsius, monsoons stall, Sahel rains vanish. The phrase nuclear winter migrates from academic footnote to grocery line chatter. Wheat futures cease trading when prairie soils freeze in mid-August. Moscow ships grain to St. Petersburg by icebreaker for the first time in June. Scientists plug aerosol optical depth figures into climate models and whisper a time frame, 5 years until arable belts retract like wounded animals toward the equator. Year 1, Information Schism. Internet trunk lines, already battered by EMP, are throttled by cyber backlashes. Digital islands form, North American nets, Sino-Russian nets, fragmentary Euronets. Outside each enclave, rumor outstrips photon. Deepfakes proliferate, showing non-existent retaliatory strikes, Mumbai glowing white, Riyadh flattened content that achieves psychological warfare without the expensive physics. Populations form reality cults around whichever feed remains reachable. Truth, once a commons, becomes boutique. Year 2 to 3, the thirst wars. Lower rainfall plus blown-out infrastructure equals continental dehydration. In California's Central Valley, almond orchards are chainsawed for firewood as aquifers fall below pump reach. The Nile Delta subsides under saltwater intrusion, Cairo's population caravans southwest in ragged processions visible from orbit. Nations reimagine borders around desalination plants and glacial melt rivers. Skirmishes erupt over pipeline valves monitored by drones too precious to down. Geneva Conventions are cited, laughed at, and finally forgotten. Year 4, Currency of Calories. Gold loses luster when calories buy bullets. Bootleg seed banks are guarded like Fort Knox. A single non-GMO corn kernel trades for a liter of diesel in Johannesburg. Cities degrow in concentric diebacks, first the suburbs, then the inner ring, until only fortified historical centers pulse dimly at night. Urban pruning becomes policy delivered in humanitarian pressers that spin depopulation as voluntary resettlement. Year 5, Governance Ashfall. The United Nations relocates to Brasilia after New York suffers grid collapse and rodent-borne epidemics. Quorum is seldom met, 5 permanent seats have morphed into 3, then 2, then ceremonial emptiness. Regional councils rise, the Andean Mutuals, the Baltic Free Zones, the East African Kernel Compact. None claims legitimacy beyond rifle range, but each prints passports. The map is now confetti-pinned by checkpoints. Prelude to the final spiral. Somewhere in the Andes, a radio astronomer discovers that upper ionospheric density is falling faster than models predict, persistent particulate shading from the Iran-Israel exchange, plus secondary soot from 27 later tactical detonations. The noctilucent clouds intensify, signaling that Earth's mesosphere is cooling. Jet streams twist, spawning cyclones into unseasonal latitudes. The final spiral will not be announced, it will simply begin with a harvest that never germinates. The air is thinner now, though no one quite knows whether that is because of the altitude or the decade-long drift of soot that still circles the globe like a funereal halo. In what used to be June of Year 6, children in the Andean Mutuals watch the sun set at 4:30 in the afternoon, its disk flickering behind a suspended archipelago of particulates that paint the horizon with rusty opalescence. They do not remember a different sky, and that innocent amnesia is the one mercy the old world has given them. Their parents, meanwhile, kneel in terraced fields coaxing quinoa from soil enriched with ground-up charcoal and the powdered bones of llamas. Biochar and calcium, the agronomists whisper, are all that stand between the last harvest and no harvest at all. The global mean temperature has continued its morbid waltz downward. Another half-degree since the preceding solstice, while regional microclimates whip and buckle like fabric in a hurricane. In the former Mediterranean basin, grapevines now sprout icicles in March. In the Canadian Maritimes, mangroves creep northward, drunk on rising brine. The old latitudinal logic of agriculture is gone. Crops survive only where they are shepherded by micro-republics of horticulturalists who trade pollen the way Renaissance bankers once traded florins. Each dawn, they unzip pollen vaults, remove vials of genetic hope, and move down rows of stunted stalks with feather brushes like monks illuminating the final manuscript of creation. It is in this strange half-winter that the die-off winters begin. They arrive not as a single catastrophe but as overlapping concentric rings of absence. First go the pollinators. Honeybees, already hammered by pesticides in the pre-apocalypse era, cannot navigate the constant twilight. Then perish the insects that lived off the bees' cast-offs, and then the birds that shadowed the insects. By year 7, the dawn chorus across 3 continents has fallen silent, replaced by the click of Geiger counters and the distant groan of windmills scavenged from abandoned solar farms. Electric silence becomes the soundtrack of daylight. The thawing vaults. Permafrost, paradoxically, also retreats under the erratic climate. Along the Yana River, ankles of once entombed woolly mammoths peek through mushy peat, and with them seep pathogens that last infected flesh 40,000 years ago. In St. Petersburg, the city's name survives even if its boulevards are skeletons. Virologists huddle in a fortress lab built from shipping containers welded together like Lego in a fever dream. They isolate a new strain of orthopoxvirus resurrected from mammoth marrow, and for a moment the scientific thrill overwhelms their dread. Then they realize the virus replicates at 12 degrees Celsius, which is precisely the temperature of most of the new equatorial refugee corridors. A single courier drone crash at the lab's perimeter fence unleashes a contagion that few immune systems have ever rehearsed against. In the chaotic year that follows, Yana pox will scythe halfway around the planet, traveling inside the lungs of desperate stowaways clinging to the undersides of maglev cargo sleds. Currency recalibrated. Calories, bullets, and kilowatt-hours remain the triad of exchange, but a fourth tender begins to dominate: clean data. When orbital collisions cascade, first a spent NOAA weathersat colliding with a Chinese comms platform, then a retired spy bird shattering into auto-multiplying shrapnel, it takes only 3 months before the Kessler horizon is crossed. Low Earth orbit becomes a glinting minefield. Launch becomes suicide. Satellites wink out one by one until the planet is encircled by an unintentional iron curtain of metallic confetti. Suddenly, accurate star charts, coastal maps, and archived weather models are priceless. A flash drive can buy a family's passage through the Isthmus corridor, provided its encryption is intact and its CRC checksum still validates. Across what remains of Europe, monasteries are reborn, not as religious nodes but as data cloisters. In candlelit scriptoriums, technomonastics copy code onto vellum, embossing QR glyphs onto calfskin that will outlast flash memory's fragile electrons. A single Git repository for desalination pump firmware, painstakingly recopied line by line onto parchment, becomes the Magna Carta of a coastal barony in what was once Brittany. The new nobility rule not by divine right but by checksum authority. Everyday survival. Zoom down into the ravine cities of the Neo-Andes and you find the rhythm of ordinary hours. At pre-dawn, the ash breathers, scavengers equipped with cast-off airline masks, now retrofitted with layers of silk and activated carbon, scale the ridge walls to scrape last night's fallout from plastic tarps. They collect the gray snow into sealed barrels destined for filtration plants, where its embedded radioisotopes are harvested for thermoelectric batteries. Energy is literally wrung from catastrophe. A family's lamp can burn all week on the beta decay of specks that once drifted over the Levant. By mid-morning, bartering commences in the Basilica Market, a roofless cathedral whose stained glass blew out during quake 3.22 years prior. Traders lay out ex-luxury goods next to mutant zucchini, cracked Rolexes beside crimson squash the size of toddlers, their skins mottled with harmless but unnerving chlorophyll eruptions. Conversation dances between Spanish, Quechua, and a pidgin of hexadecimal slang used to negotiate data swaps. A snippet of pre-war Netflix series can be worth 2 sacks of amaranth if it completes someone's archive. Nostalgia is both poison and balm. Children attend wind school on the plaza steps, reciting Beaufort scales instead of multiplication tables. Forecasting gusts means predicting soot plumes means predicting tomorrow's UV index. An error can cost entire harvest boxes. They learn cloud typology the way earlier generations memorized capital cities, though capitals now are movable feasts attached to locust-like caravans of parliamentarians who legislate on the run. Year 8. The Nightfall Protocol. The crumpling grid finally extinguishes the world's last pressurized water reactors. After the meltdowns in Illinois, Guangdong, and Normandy, the surviving plant managers initiate the Nightfall Protocol, venting remaining coolant into subterranean salt caverns rather than let the zirconium cladding ignite in open air. Even so, half-lived isotopes gurgle upward through fractured strata for months, salting aquifers and lending a faint T50 sparkle to rivers under ultraviolet flashlights. Rainwater collection becomes an art. Ceramic funnels glazed with lead-free silicone and coated in hydrophobic nanoflakes. An elder's cache of intact reverse osmosis membranes, once dismissed as hoarding, now qualifies her as village deity. The ocean turns black-green. Photosynthetic plankton retreat beneath expanding mats of azoth bloom. A sulfur-eating algae genetically engineered back when venture capital chased geoengineering miracles. In the post-fall world, the strain has gone feral, excreting dimethyl sulfide that thickens maritime air into broom. Fishing boats, those few that still dare, sail through oily jade viscera, their nets corroded by microbial acid. Protein scarcity drives coastal enclaves inland in search of freshwater eels bred in mirrored ponds under LED grow towers powered by pedal dynamos. Microstate wars and cloud-bright cities. Around the Red Sea, a federation of 3 port cities rebrands itself Caldera and announces possession of a functioning cloud-brightening array. Towers that blast seawater microcrystals into the troposphere to reflect incoming sunlight. Instantly, Caldera becomes a magnet for pilgrim militaries. Sudanese bike brigades, Jordanian desert skiffs, mercenary drone squads whose pilots guide Hellfire quadrotors via fiber tethers to avoid radio jamming. The siege of Caldera lasts 9 weeks and ends when a lightning storm, seeded inadvertently by the array's own ions, incinerates both attackers and defenders in an electrified downpour. Post-battle satellite imagery never materializes, and rumors paint Caldera variously as a crater lake, a glassy salt pan, or a reborn Atlantis. The lesson is clear. Geoengineering is both throne and guillotine. Culture salvage. Not all endeavors are martial. In the husk of Los Angeles, a roving troupe called the Archivists of Echo Park project classic films against freeway underpasses. Their fuel? Compressed biogas extracted from fermenting kudzu tangled over the Hollywood sign. They splice frames of new footage, scenes of gray market marriages, street surgeries, rooftop gardens, between reels of Casablanca and Mad Max, weaving a tapestry that reminds audiences that survival alone is not living. Barter accepted in seeds, stories, or clean antimicrobials. The show must go on, even if the audience numbers 50 and every cough might be Yanapox. Orbital silence echoes below. Without GNSS timing pulses, power grids synchronized by the swing of pendulums and the pulse of human muscle. Railways issue departures based on solar noon. Time zones fracture into local chroniclines. A traveler crossing the Midwest in year 9 must reset her watch 15 times between Omaha and Cleveland, though neither name appears on road signs now replaced by glyphs signifying water availability and pest density. The term time zone fatigue enters vernacular psychiatry to describe the cognitive vertigo of never knowing which yesterday one occupies. Skyfire storms. The magnetosphere, bruised by successive EMPs and reduced solar input, convulses into electrojets that paint the heavens with red-violet ribbons down to 20 degrees latitude. These low-latitude auroras, dubbed skyfires, fry unshielded circuitry whenever they flare. Communities dig copper grounding rods yards deep and weave Faraday fabric into every jacket seam. Yet some see beauty amid hazard. Weddings are scheduled to coincide with skyfire forecasts, the couple illuminated by rags of cosmic neon that scrawl omens across the heavens. Year 10, the Treaty of the Five Valleys. In the lee of the Alps, 5 linguistically divergent cantons, once fragments of France, Italy, and Switzerland, ratify what they grandly call a treaty, though it amounts to sharing a single river, a single wind ward, and a handful of heirloom seeds. Still, it is the first territorial accord in 4 years not sealed at gunpoint. Observers from the Andean mutuals attend via heliograph relays, blinking Morse across 2 oceans in cascading mirror code. The accord's preamble invokes solidarite biotique, biotic solidarity, a phrase that ripples outward and is graffitied onto grain silos from Manitoba to Maharashtra. No one knows whether the treaty will last a season, but the idea that agreement is still possible travels faster than any caravan. Everyday post-apocalypse. Imagine a breakfast. A ceramic bowl of kelp meal porridge, flecked with powdered cricket thorax, sweetened by a syrup distilled from frostbitten grapes that never ripened. You swallow it beside a window slit fitted with UVB filter film scavenged from a museum exhibit. The street below yawns between half-collapsed concrete ribs, yet it bustles with repair crews stringing fiber made from repurposed spider silk, stronger than steel, immune to copper thieves. At noon you cycle to the common roof, a bar-coated terrace of reflective tiles whose primary function is to bounce light into subroof vegetable beds. You log watt-hours on a slate, chalking in digits next to the communal tally of kilojoules produced versus consumed. Evening brings a trumpeted curfew. Not authoritarian, simply pragmatic, night temps can drop below freezing even in what used to be August, and hypothermia remains democracy's great equalizer. In personal journals, those that survive damp, mold, and occasional confiscation, people stopped calling the age post-apocalyptic around year 8. The prefix post implied the blast radius was finite, that one could walk beyond it. By year 10, everyone understands. The apocalypse is not behind them or ahead. It is the medium through which they now swim, like plankton suspended in a slow-motion maelstrom. And yet, as philosophers scribble on scraps of mylar, fish inhabit water without naming it. Likewise, humanity hums with quiet adaptations. Marrow thickens, melanin deepens, lung capacity nudges upward. Evolution, long a rumor whispered in classrooms, is becoming a hearthside story told by grandparents as they weave rad silk shawls for newborns. Prelude to the deep dusk. Scientists, there are still scientists, gather in what was once a ski resort in the Southern Alps, now a fortified think tank called Glacio 1. They model aerosol residence times and conclude the stratospheric veil will likely persist for another quarter century. But new data from atmospheric sounding balloons reveals a sinister twist. The aerosol layer is stratifying into alternating thermal bands, breeding jet stream eddies that could lock weather systems in place for years. They name the projection deep dusk, a scenario in which daylight becomes a dim amber smear and photosynthesis drops another 40%. Grain varieties have no chance without artificial light. Humanity must decide whether to gamble on a second wave of orbital sun mirrors, an option complicated by the Kessler belt, or to retreat underground where bioluminescent fields of engineered fungi glow like sapphire fields in cavernous vaults. Down in the ravine cities, none of this modeling trickles fast enough to matter before supper. People see only the omens overhead. Sunsets bleeding into darkness without the usual coda of twilight, like a candle snuffed rather than allowed to gutter. Whisper networks bubble with rumors of permanent night in less than a decade. No one can confirm it, there are too few instruments, too much static, but the rumor alone rearranges migration patterns. Convoys drift equatorward chasing those latitudes where daylight lingers 10 minutes longer. The equatorial belt, already swollen past its carrying capacity, braces for the influx by digging deeper aquifer wells and armoring desal plants with adobe walls studded with broken glass. A final cafe still operates in the shell of Quito's old town, Café Horizonte, its neon sign powered by scavenged thermoelectrics. A chalkboard outside displays daily riddles whose answers win you an extra splash of powdered milk. Today's riddle is simple. What travels the slowest yet runs out the fastest? Inside, a blind poet thinks he knows. He taps the braille keys of a hand crank embossing machine, punching out verses that speak of a sky turning to stone and of hearts learning to beat in geological time. And somewhere, in a subterranean archive that smells of ozone and cedar oil, a single seed blinks in the beam of a UV sterilizer. Z maize, heritage strain, viability 98%. A technician slides it into a vacuum-sealed ampoule and whispers not a prayer but a logistics code. The apocalypse, after all, is not an ending. It is a ledger, credits and debits tallied in calories, in kilowatts, and in promises yet to germinate. The memory of daylight grows faint, yet the instincts honed in a brighter epoch persist, driving people to glance skyward every morning as though from habit alone they might drag the sun back into proper brilliance. By year 11, humans no longer measure time in calendars but in spectrums. Each dawn's wavelength is sampled by prism shards lashed to window frames, then recorded on smoke-blackened slates. A violet-skewed dawn signals good crop lamp efficiency. A green-tinted one warns of aerosol surges that will throttle photovoltaics. Thus, color, once aesthetic, becomes actuarial. Echoes in the Rust Belt. Across what was once the American Midwest, grain elevators rise like cathedral spires above an inland sea of tumbleglass. Fused sand produced when EMPs and lightning arcs struck dry lakebeds. Townsfolk chipped the glass into razor flakes to inlay warning mosaics around communal gardens. Beneath one such elevator, a newly founded council of resonance gathers nightly. Their creed, that harmonic vibrations, broadcast through subsoil loudspeakers, can coax root fibers deeper, past pockets of radiocesium into cleaner clay. They argue about frequency the way theologians once debated grace. The harvest that follows is marginally improved, enough to legitimize the doctrine, and pilgrims arrive with tuning forks tied around their necks like pilgrim badges of old. Devout or not, everyone listens when the ground hums at sunset, a basso profondo that seems to knit together marrow and memory. Yana Pox's second bloom. Mutated in equatorial transit corridors, Yana Pox reemerges with a latency phase so deceptive that victims appear healthy weeks after infection, only to erupt in searing pustules moments after intense physical exertion. Olympic-style contests, reborn in refugee camps as morale boosters, become superspreader marvels. A single foot trace in the ruins of Nairobi seeds 93 outbreaks across 3 continents, carried by cheering relatives riding cargo dirigibles. Medical cadres respond with heat guns that cauterize pustules as they form, a desperate protocol nicknamed Torch Mercy. Survivors are few but visibly marked, their scar patterns mistaken for tattoos of bravery. Subcultures adopt phoscarification in solidarity, and soon you cannot tell who is health cleared and who is theatrical. Epidemiology devolves into fashion critique. Stratospheric mining. Deep dusk darkens further when a coalition of equatorial powers launches kilometer-wide aerostats, balloon platforms trailing conductive tethers, into the lower stratosphere to vacuum carbon soot electrostatically. The plan is elegant. Collect, sinter into wafers, jettison the heavy disks to splashdown zones, and smelt them into radiation shield tiles for cavern cities. But the act of dragging current through the charged ash filters catalyzes ball lightning strings. Ropes of plasma that snake down the tethers and scour everything they kiss. The second aerostat, codename UBIK-2, vaporizes above the Congo basin, its plasma flail carving a trench of molten glass 30 kilometers long. The project is abandoned after the 4th incident, leaving a flotilla of unmanned balloons drifting like pale leviathans across twilight skies. Children chase their ghost carcasses, hoping for dropped supplies, inventing songs that rhyme Zeppelin with heaven. Governance by lottery. Hierarchical government proves brittle under perpetual crisis, so sociologists in the Andean mutuals propose sortition loops. Leadership slots rotated weekly via random draw among all literate adults. To avoid the chaos of total novitiates, each caretaker shadows her predecessor for a single overlap day and inherits a data slate containing network passwords, grain ledgers, and an encrypted moral ledger recording every prior decision. The shuffle confounds would-be coup plotters. No one can predict who holds the keys tomorrow. Outsiders dismiss it as carnival governance until year-end audits show better calorie equity than any neighboring realm. Refugee caravans detour hundreds of kilometers for a chance at residency. Lottery lists swell. The mutuals reluctantly cap immigration and spark diplomatic envy bordering on hostility. The silent revolution of gray water. In year 12, the most important invention requires no lithium or plutonium. A porous ceramic brick impregnated with marine bacteria capable of stripping iodine, 131 from sewage. The mycobrick, as labs call it, transforms toxic gray water into potable flow at the rate of 1 liter per brick per day, slow, but inexhaustible if kept damp. Production centers mushroom in abandoned ceramics factories worldwide. Trade records show bricks traveling farther than spice ever did, their carriers honored like Silk Road guardians. At border posts, guards tap bricks with fingernails to hear the telltale thrum of living cultures. Dead bricks sound hollow and earn only pity or prison. Water soon underwrites every contract, and marriages include dowries of mycobricks glazed in family crests. The siege of Tesla crater. On the far side of the moon, autonomous mining rigs, left humming since pre-war decades, continue excavating regolith for helium-3 that would never ship home. They pile spoil into geometric berms visible from DIY telescopes, inspiring myths of lunar citadels untouched by Earth's blight. In year 13, a consortium of vault cities funds a last-ditch launch. A single stage to orbit, fueled by algal methane, carrying 2 crew and a seed bank. The rocket reaches 80 kilometers before slamming into debris. a shrapnel cloud catalogued ages ago, but impossible to track in real time. The wreckage streaks back across Australia, showering the Gibson Desert with titanium petals that glow for hours. The failure kills any appetite for further launches. Humanity officially cedes orbit to silence and legend. Life in the subway archipelagos. New York's defunct subway tunnels flood waist-deep each high tide, forming brackish canals navigated by flat-bottom skiffs. Residents, calling themselves mole mariners, string phosphor lanterns along tiled curvature, giving grand central depths the ambience of a drowned Sistine Chapel. They farm water spinach on foam rafts anchored to turn-of-century iron columns. Invasive carp populate the tunnels, feeding on bodega refuse flushed down storm drains. Above ground, skyscrapers are skeletons tickled by constant wind, but below, the mole mariners tune salvaged saxophones to the echoing frequency of the tunnels. A new music that throbs like whale song through the catacombs of finance's former capital. Cognitive drift. Psychologists note a syndrome dubbed chronoagnosia. Survivors can recount global events in rich detail, yet fail to place them on any timeline. Decade-long trauma loops fracture episodic memory. Brain scans reveal hippocampal rewiring where timestamps once encoded. Communities adapt by storytelling circles that graft personal events onto astronomical markers. The Perseids, equinox eclipses, sky firestorms, re-externalizing chronology the way ancient farmers once did. Oral historians rise to civic prominence, cycling from town to town weaving tapestries of alignment. If your daughter sprouted her first tooth during the last triple aurora, then the May's blight arrived 2 moons later. The past becomes a star chart read by midnight campfire. Fusion of faiths. Religion, unable to anchor itself in distant heavens now obscured by the veil, turns inside out. A syncretic movement called the Hearthward Fold blends Hasidic nigunim, Sufi whirling, and Zen kinhin into a single ritual. Spiral walking around a cooking fire, chanting wordless melodies in rising Ionian modes. Their theology is post-cosmic. Divinity, they say, is any heat that cooks beans. Fold caravans roam, repairing rocket stoves and teaching efficient burn methods. Skeptics tolerate them because reduced smoke means cleaner lungs. In year 14, Fold engineers prototype the forgiveness kiln, a dome of clay and titanium shards that converts plastic waste into char usable as soil amendment. The name is no metaphor. Villages offer broken toys, riot shields, even old ration cards to the kiln's mouth. Absolution by pyrolysis. Global politics in a single deal. With orbit lost, oceans acidifying, and aerosols thickening, 5 major polities meet for perhaps the last grand bargain. The Tlatelolco Conclave, hosted in the Mexico City drainage terraces that used to be Chapultepec Park. Delegates arrive by llama caravan, solar sled, and repurposed battle zeppelin. The agenda: partition the remaining phosphorus mines of Morocco, whose output now dictates every growing season. Negotiations begin with ceremonial exchange of water, 1 sip per envoy, from identical cups to prevent poisoning. Over 16 days they craft a distribution algorithm allocable via hash chains on stone tablets etched by laser engravers powered by pedals. The treaty's success is celebrated when the first convoy of Moroccan phosphate dust reaches Manila agrovaults without being hijacked. Skeptics proclaim that even doomsday yields commerce. Optimists that commerce forestalls an encore doomsday. The children of static. Radio amateurs, some merely kids armed with crystal sets, stumble on a repeating pattern embedded in background hiss. Triplets of tones that do not match known error checks. The pattern cycles every 91 minutes, implying a source in polar low Earth orbit. But simulators insist all functioning transmitters died with the satellites. Conspiracy blossoms. Is an AI-piloted remnant objecting to human self-termination? Families cluster around cobbled receivers at twilight, hoping the tones will one day decode into instructions to heal the sky. Even sober engineers pray to the voice of static, leaving offerings of spent capacitors and copper wire at hilltop antenna shrines. A mythology of machine compassion is born, a digital angelus rung by dead circuits. Deep dusk agriculture. Photosynthesis now buys only 4 hours of photons in many latitudes. Thus the rise of lumen shepherds, wearing mirror wing capes sewn from crashed drone reflectors, They hike ridgelines at dawn, angling sunlight toward terrace crops via tens of thousands of heliostat shards mounted on scavenged bicycle gears. Each dawn is a choreographed ballet. One misturned mirror and a potato bed withers. Children apprentice at 6, navigating mirror mazes like surfers riding light. The term heliotropism regains sacred glow. Prayers include angle declinations. One drought summer, an eclipse flattens yields by half a province. That winter the shepherds carve parabolic reflectors from ice, using internal reflection to lengthen the day with moonlight. The collapse of language walls. Trade pigeons proliferate until the lines between Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, and Swahili blur into Paxic, a Creole optimized for barter. Verbs vanish, tense implied by gesture. Adjectives stack post-noun like price tags. Scholars lament linguistic loss, but peasants rejoice. Fewer words mean faster deals before dust storms roll in. Translation guilds adapt by curating emotional nuance. They teach that a bowed head adds subjunctive. A hand on heart adds future intention. Poetry thrives in gesture. Love letters become finger dance sequences recorded on haptic paper. Aurora fisheries. In the Arctic gloom, nitrate-rich snowmelt combines with magnetospheric ions to spawn thick mats of sky krill, cyanoarthropods genetically tweaked decades earlier for Mars terraforming experiments. They fluoresce under auroras, attracting seals, then polar bears, and finally human fleets retrofitting icebreakers into floating bioreactors. Sky krill convert into protein slurry fed into extruders that mint flavorless nutrient bars, but bars that keep. The hunt is perilous. One geomagnetic bloom can fry guidance systems, trapping ships in jigsaw ice. Memorial walls in Reykjavik inscribe names lost to the green belly, as mariners call the writhing phosphorescent ooze below the pack. Psychological economics. Currency systems adopt emotional backing. Credit scores now pair with effect scores captured by biometric readers at trade houses. Displays show color halos around traders' profiles. Green hues for calm, red for rage. A calm seller earns better exchange rates, stabilizing markets through peer pressure toward emotional regulation. Black market medtech emerges. Microdoses of synthetic oxytocin, adrenal dampeners brewed from kelp and cobalt. Philosophers debate whether free will survive when serotonin futures dictate bread prices. The first underground sunrise. Year 15. Deep under the Urals, engineers trigger the Helios reactor, not nuclear but optical. A torus of fusion-powered lasers painting giant phosphor walls, simulating dawn from mushroom terraces. When the switch flips, 100 hectares ignite in golden glow. Workers drop tools and sob. Some die of cardiogenic shock, a sudden rush of remembered sunlight. Word spreads via drum relays. Pilgrims head underground, seeking the dawn that no longer rises above. A new proverb emerges. We buried the sun to see it rise again. Prelude to the terminal equation. Climate mathematicians at Glacio 1 feed 15 years of aerosol, ocean heat, and biosphere feedback into their last functioning supercluster. The output scrolls onto thermal paper, a curve racing toward a vertical asymptote they dub the terminal equation. It predicts that within 8 years, Earth's net primary productivity will plunge below the metabolic maintenance threshold for mammalian life. In lay terms, the planet is about to enter a cadaveric spasm, alive but unable to replenish tissue faster than decay. News of the equation leaks. Suicide festivals erupt along coasts, while in the ravine cities, people tattoo the asymptote onto wrists as reminder to accelerate hope, not despair. Everyday life at the asymptote. Morning, you swallow a pill, compress spirulina laced with lithium to blunt radiation sickness, and pedal a generator rig until sweat fogs your face mask. At lunch, you meet a mirror orphan, a child whose parents died adjusting heliostats. You trade her a microbrick for an old paperback she found sealed in mylar. You read by lantern. It's Ray Bradbury, pages smelling of ozone and creosote. Evening brings the sound of distant horns, lumen shepherds signaling a successful light harvest. You climb to roof level, watch silhouettes in mirror capes tilting against the dimming sky, and feel, impossibly, a pang of gratitude. If humanity must race an asymptote, at least the track is lit by audacity. Somewhere, beyond a drift of powdered glass and frozen krill effluent. A child tapes prisms to a paper sun wheel and whispers, "What if we spin it faster?" The apocalypse tightens, but so does resolve. The world is a spiral staircase now, each step narrower, darker, steeper, and yet the climb goes on because gravity itself has become an act of will. By year 16, dawn is a rumor traded like contraband across the continents, a hush-hush memory of warmth that older mouths describe the way sailors once spoke of mermaids, real enough to yearn for, impossible enough to question. Children born since the Iran-Israel flash call the ochre sky cinderlight. Their first crayons are charcoal, and every house keeps a sunbox, a ragged scrapbook of pre-war postcards taped beside reflective foil, reminders that color used to be more than signal code. The threshold of breath. Aerosol density reaches the point where hemoglobin starves for oxygen at sea level. Populations migrate upslope en masse, converting mountain ridges into blade-thin megalopolises strung along what cartographers rename the isobar frontier. Here, air pressure still hugs a survivable 87 kilopascals, and every fist of soil is terraced into shallows for fungal potatoes. Entire cities disassemble themselves brick by brick, hauled skyward on cable railways powered by captive thermal drafts. Abandoned lowlands become fog hollows, swamps of electrosludge where anything metal corrodes to lace within weeks. Legends spread that fog hollows sing at night, an electrostatic choir born of wind whistling through iron skeletons of shopping malls. The last archive and the first whisper. Beneath the Carpathians, librarians in hermetically sealed vaults finish etching the Codex Ian, a multi-layer sapphire disk storing the sum of post-flash knowledge in laser-engraved femtoglyphs. The Codex is designed to survive 10 million winters. As the final glyph is burned, the power fails. No one speaks. They seal the vault and carry the redundant backup in their teeth, tiny silica beads strung on sinew necklaces. From here on, data lives on tongues and talismans. Entropy festivals. Facing the terminal equation's 8-year clock, cultures revolt against despair with entropy festivals, carnivals scheduled on mathematically calculated milestones of system degradation. The day when total leaf biomass dips below global insect biomass, or when plankton fluorescence loses one spectral peak. Revelers don garments of recycled hazard tape and dance atop UV-bleached rooftops, hoisting banners that read "Celebrate the Unfinished Equation." Sociologists note that suicide rates plummet after each festival, the paradox of hope found in flamboyant acknowledgement of doom. The rise of the Esterian program. In the vault city of Puna Sur, a warren of basalt tunnels high in the Altiplano, engineers proposed the Esterian program, named after the labyrinth's minotaur. Their premise: if the stratospheric veil cannot be lifted, then carve light from within the planet. They locate a super plume of geothermal flux 30 kilometers under the Pacific Plate and design kilometer-long fiber bundles to pipe coherent biophotonic emissions upward through mantle fractures. In theory, vents would bloom like artificial auroras, flooding cloud decks with enough photons to resurrect photosynthesis. Funding? Phosphorus futures, microbricks, and promises of first-option migration slots. Critics label it delusion. Dreamers carve stone to house the eventual launch rig. When oceans turn to mirrors, acidification and thermal stagnation spawn vast pellicles of silica-based plankton that harden into mirror-like scum. Satellites are gone, but from mountain ledges people swear they can glimpse flashes off Pacific horizons, dead calm surfaces glinting like liquid chrome. Mariners who venture out report that under the scum lie fathoms of anoxic black water, roiling with blind tube worms the width of a man's thigh. They harvest the worms' collagenous skins, which cure into nearly transparent membranes, mirror glass, that begin to replace shattered window panes and visor shields. Thus, even decay feeds construction in the spiral. Thread law and the economy of repair. Scarcity sanctifies thread. A global thread law emerges by unspoken consensus. No cloth may be discarded. Tailors ascend to magistrate status, and every settlement hosts a needle court arbitrating disputes over frayed seams or unauthorized reweaving. In the needle court of Nablus Ravine, a cloak lined with copper wire useful for Faraday protection is decreed indivisible property of a commune. The defendant had tried to snip the lining for a baby's crib. The court's solution is Solomonic stitching, one continuous thread double-looped so both child and radiotech share the same protective circuit. Thus jurisprudence evolves into embroidery. The stormglass revelation. Meteorologists, now oracles, craft storm glass spires, vertical columns filled with supersaturated ethanol that crystallize in response to barometric whim. One night, the entire network of spires from the Urals to Patagonia blooms in simultaneous dendritic frost, an impossible synchronicity. The pattern matches a predictive model suggesting the jet stream gyres will snap into a fixed tetragonal arrangement for colossal storms, stationary, locking the atmosphere. Implication: the planet will host 4 permanent hypercyclones, churning walls demarcating habitable quadrants. Panic threatens, but Lumen Shepherd Guilds sees the data first, translating it into migration charts that steer caravans between future storm walls. Civilization's last act of cartography is born of crystal fractal spires. Year 17, the Foreseen Pact. With the Stormglass prophecy looming, representatives from each emergent quadrant forge the Foreseen Pact via signal fires and semaphore, share heliostat schematics, seed strains, and tunneling tech. They engrave the pact into bedrock at the geometric center point, somewhere in the empty highlands of Tibet, so that no storm wall can erase it. The engraving crew works in respirators at 5,000 m altitude, chipping cuneiform commands, share or vanish. When they finish, the first of the tetragonal storms roars to life 800 kilometers east, a black pillar that climbs into cinder light like an infinite tornado. Everyday life behind the storm wall. Inside Quadrant West, bordered by the Atlantic cyclone named Marduk, days settle into a new rhythm. Sirens wail not for attack but for barometric drift. Families check seam charts before hanging laundry to dry in subterranean heat vents. Children play shadow tag under phosphor street lamps run on geothermal seep. Evening meals are communal, kelp krill hash fried on reflective skillets. Dessert is mirror pudding set with silica gelatin, its surface so reflective you can watch your own dwindling pupils dilate as you swallow. At night, wind harps mounted on roofs translate Marduk's turbulence into somber hymns that lull youngsters to sleep and remind elders of ocean surf long vanished. The WhisperNet. Zinc air batteries fail in cinder-light cold, so technologists revert to photonic whispering. Modulated laser pulses bounced between mountaintop mirrors barely larger than shaving glass. The network is line of sight, vulnerable to fog, but unjammable. Each message must fit a single packet, 256 photons. Compression algorithms turn into poetry. A treaty can be written in 5 words, a love letter in 3. One famed transmission says simply, "Sun found beneath." Debate rages whether it's code for a geothermal chamber pulsing with light or a marital birth announcement delivered in metaphor. Regardless, sun found beneath becomes graffiti of faith across ridgeline settlements. The fall of the mycelium wall. Underground agronomy thrives until rabane, a rogue microfungus, mutates to metabolize the ceramic shielding of grow tunnels. One by one, farms glow faintly as containment fails, leaving fields of ghost-lit mushrooms that feed on radiation but exude neurotoxins. Immediate solution: torch the tunnels and move deeper. Long-term consequence: the edible fungi that once saved millions are now extinct in 3 quadrants. Protein crisis reignites long-dormant rumors of cannibal brigades. Governments, still mostly councils of rotating caretakers, reopen ancient vaults in Kansas and Kursk. Gambling that century-old bovine embryos may be viable if gestated in lab vats. The renewal of oceans. While humans turn inward, oceans rebel outward. Mirror scum fractures under relentless cyclonic shear, exposing nutrient-rich layers to faint sunlight and triggering the azure rebloom, a surge of blue-green algae that belches oxygen at pre-flash levels for the first time in 16 years. Atmospheric bolometers register a 0.3% rise in O2 for the first time since Fog Hollow sang. Candles burn brighter without sputtering. Scientists dance, but caution, the bloom may overcorrect CO2 drawdown, deepening the chill. Yet for a single season, quadrants report nosebleeds from oxygen euphoria, and miners at 4,000 m breathe like sea-level joggers. Hope reoxygenates too. Year 18, the Esterian ignition. Against all odds, Puna Sur completes the Esterian drill. Fiber bundles vanish into a magma vent. Witnesses swear they hear a basso heartbeat echo through the Andes. For 4 minutes, clouds over the Pacific ignite with pink limelight brighter than any day since year 0. Crops soaked in the sudden glow explode in photosynthetic frenzy. Leaves unfurl overnight. Rice paddies shimmer jade. Then a filament fuses, light dies, and the vent collapses. But it was enough. Seed banks confirm viable grain multiplication by a factor of 6. The message is clear: light, even borrowed, births miracles. Coda of the voice of static. Crystal set operators finally decipher the triplet tones, a simple binary mask correlating to prime numbers. They overlay timestamps and reveal a countdown set to expire on the 20th anniversary of the Iran-Israel exchange. Interpretation splits camps. The machines announce our execution, say fatalists. They mark a rebirth, claim optimists. Quadrants prepare both ways, mass lullaby concerts alongside fortification drills. On the anniversary, the static vanishes. In its place bursts a carrier wave of plain Morse. Hello deep listeners equals you are not alone. Signal triangulation is impossible through the storm walls, but correlation with ionospheric echoes implies transmission not from orbit, but from subterranean array somewhere in fog hollow depths, a message from humans unreached or machines evolved. Either source reshapes imagination. Isolation was myth all along. The Phoenix Compact. Fueled by the voice, assemblies across quadrants convene simultaneous referenda via WhisperNet packets. Resolution: pool remaining geothermal lasers, lens-grade ice, and silica worm glass to attempt helioring, a circumstorm network of light pipes skirting the planet's waste, feeding photons to every quadrant from the still-gleaming equator. Construction commences under Marduk's roar. Convoy crafters braid copper harvested from subway catacombs. Mirror orphans again risk rooftops to aim initial relays. It will take a decade. The asymptote looms in 5 years. But spiral stairs were meant for climbing, however narrow. Everyday life with a ring in the sky. Skyfarers, once just lumen shepherds, now steer like kites, mylar wings that surf nascent laser beams, hauling fiber spools across cyclonic gulfs. Children trace arcs of crimson across the black cloud, cheering each new segment. Meals improve, kale grown in heliolit atria tastes faintly of hope. Songs change key, composers find major chords again after years of dirge. Markets trade in rads forgiven, a metric of helio exposure measured in new leaf mass. Epilogue: the continuum beyond apocalypse. Year 20 approaches, and with it the terminal equation's vertical line, yet humanity has curved the graph, bulged it sideways with helioparabolas and azure algal eruptions. The asymptote is still there, mathematics doesn't flinch, but it is no longer the end of the story, merely the end of that line of best fit. New variables entered: courage, serendipity, stubbornness. Equations can be transcended by adding dimensions. Somewhere in Quadrant South, a grandparent opens a sunbox for her grandson. Inside, a faded postcard of Tel Aviv's beach from before the first flash, and beside it, a shard of mirror glass newly smelted from Pacific scum. The child holds postcard to shard, seeing past and future glitter in the same spectrum. Will the sky ever be blue again? He asks. She answers not with certainty but with arithmetic. 15 kilometers of helioring finished, 31 to go. Azure rebloom 4% stronger this solstice than last. Oxidation up, despair down. Numbers in this era are lullabies. Night descends, still too early, still too cold, and the wind harps sing Marduk's cyclone hymn. Yet on the horizon, scarlet filaments of the newborn ring flicker to life, carving the dark like veins of sunrise. People halt chores, conversations, prayers. They look up, and for a heartbeat longer than gravity, the spiral staircase feels less steep. The apocalypse, it turns out, was never a period. It was always a comma and inhalation before the next clause of human tenacity.